Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Nasser Mashni, Robert Martin and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Australia's only radio program that is totally dedicated to the Palestinian cause. In English language, we would like to welcome our listeners on the AM dial and those who will join us later on 3cr.org.au/podcasts. In today's episode, we will talk about the Israeli human rights violations against their own citizens, a group of their own citizens, the Palestinians of Israel. For this and more, stay with us and enjoy the episode. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning,
Yusuf,
Nasser,
Robert,
Yusuf.
the whole team is here.
This is really exciting.
2018 is kicking off now.
Come on.
All right, Nasser.
So on the 30th of January, we had the third anniversary of Solidarity Day for Palestinians in Israel. Mm-hmm. And the High Follow-Up Committee for Arab Citizens of Israel, this is the peak representative body of Palestinian citizens in Israel. It's an inclusive, all-representative political party. It's got Arab members of the Knesset, Arab mayors, heads of Arab local councils, and all the key civil society organizations. All those organizations have called for solidarity with the Palestinians within 48 Palestine. And ultimately what they've got is a list of demands that they're calling on for the cancellation of racist and discriminatory laws. And, you know, we know about many of those. And Yusuf, you've spoken about your brother-in-law and sister-in-law, brother-in-law and sister, how they can't reunite. The implementation of UN human rights conventions, the rejection of the Jewish nation-state bill, which entrenches Palestinians as second-class citizens, mm-hmm. and to enshrine the basic tenet of all democracies that all citizens are equal regardless of race and religion, which is not currently the case. And there are many laws, over 50, that talk about that deny Palestinians their rights to be equal citizens under the law in the State of Israel. And
you can maybe share one or two of these laws?
I think one of the ones that is most important, I think, is the reunification law, Yusuf, and we've spoken about it previously with your own personal circumstance, but an Arab citizen of the State of Israel cannot marry anyone and give them citizenship.
Palestinian.
It doesn't have to be Palestinian. It could be, an Ethiopian, a French woman or a French guy or a Ukrainian guy. But anybody who's Jewish can go back to Israel and claim that they're Jewish and receive aliyah and all state benefits. So this is one of the biggest ones. A recent one that they're just pushing through now is a law to allow the Knesset, if they get a 75% majority, to expel the expulsion of a member of Knesset. So, the joint list, the Arab representatives of the member of Knesset, if 75% of the parliament votes, they can expel an elected representative to the parliament.
MP.
They can expel them for the term of that parliament. So that person isn't replaced by another member from that party. In fact, that seat goes unfilled. I mean, this is the sort of democracy that Malcolm Turnbull and the sycophants to Israel keep defending.
And we're lucky enough to have spoken with a Palestinian living in Melbourne, but from this
from
group, from Akka. Noura is a Palestinian holder of an Israeli passport who has been living in Australia for a few years. Noura is an educator, she is an activist, and she spoke to us about what it means to be Palestinian living under Israeli law. Stay with us.
Hi, I'd like to welcome Noura, who is a Palestinian born in Palestine, who holds an Israeli passport, so she's what they call an Israeli Arab. Good morning, Noura. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here with you.
So, Noura, we've been talking about the High Follow-Up Committee for Arab Citizens call for international solidarity with the 48 Palestinians, or as the Israeli Knesset refers to us as Arab Israelis. Can you take us through your journey, your birth in historic Palestine, in Akka, and the challenges you faced as a child first going to school?
Sure. I think so. My personal experience is not that different from the experience of any other Palestinian that was born and raised in Palestine 48, or what nowadays the international community likes to call Israel. And I think it's important, before I talk about my personal experience, I think it's important to keep in mind, or to keep reminding ourselves, that this day is meant to bring the Palestinians of 48 into the awareness. And basically that means putting the Nakba in the forefront and reminding people that Palestine, or the conflict, or the colonization started back in 1948, or even before that, right? It's important to keep reminding people that Palestine is not, it is Gaza and it's the West Bank, but it's also Akka and Haifa, and it's Sheikh Muannis, now called Tel Aviv, it's Khalid, now called Netanya, Tabariya and Safad, right?
Yes.
But going back to your question, which is my personal experience growing up in Akka, I think living in Akka is, if you've ever visited Akka, you can see, it's called one of the mixed cities, right? So they call it mixed because there's Arabs and Israeli Jewish people living, supposedly together. Even though we are both living in the same city, but we're not really living together, so it's not really mixed. We don't mix anywhere, right? We don't go to the same schools. We don't go to the same hangout places. We don't.
Why is that? Is there?
That's because there's a segregation in schools. So the education system is structurally, systematically racist like that, in a way that it's there's two curriculums, one for the Israeli Jewish students and one for the Arab Palestinian students. There's two separate schools. They don't mix. And I think the reason is obvious, right? It's because you want to keep that segregation happening, and you want to keep that fear of the other and that demonization of the other happening. Because if people mix, God forbid, they might like each other and then realize we're not real enemies, right?
As you were growing up, being called an Arab and not a Palestinian, is that something that was hurtful, or is it something that you wondered, or?
No, I never wondered, because thankfully I come from a family. I think, and that also applies to any of the Palestinians. Like, you can't wonder, because that system keeps reminding you that it keeps othering you, right? So in a way, even if they call you you're an Arab, or you're an Israeli, why are you saying you're Palestinian? In fact, I'm not treated as an Israeli. I'm not treated as my Israeli
citizen.
Citizen. Yes, the next Israeli citizen. So I'm not treated as one. They keep reminding me that I'm not a citizen, that I'm a second-class citizen, that I don't have rights, or that the law, even through laws, but also through practices and through people walking down the street, you might hear some racial slurs, or people might ask you stupidly to go back to Gaza when you're in fact from Safad. So it's like, well, I'd be more than happy to go back to where I'm originally from, but that is Safad. That's not Gaza.
So this makes us relatives, Noura, because my mother's family is from Safad. But anyway, go on.
Oh wow, that's it. I'm sure we will find that connection somewhere. Yeah. And I think going back to that point, that it's in Palestine 48 or in Akka or Israel behind the Green Line, whatever they call it. It's a battle of awareness as well. So I think the question that was raised by Robert is really an essential one, because they keep trying to erase that identity, the Palestinianity. Oh, you're not Palestinians. They're different. The one in the West Bank, they're different than you. So, hence you are not the same. You're not the same group of people. But that's one of the major techniques of colonials, as in to divide and conquer, but also to erase the culture and erase the identity of the colonized people.
Noura, Mahmoud Darwish describes Akka beautifully, saying that عكا أجمل المدن القديمة أقدم المدن الجميلة, the most beautiful of all old cities and the oldest of all most beautiful cities.
Absolutely agree.
And you
can't
are from
argue with Mahmoud Darwish.
Can't argue. But I want you to take us to Akka and try to describe Akka to us. I've never been to Akka. Yeah. I have a nephew and niece living there. I'm not allowed to visit them, but maybe you can take us to Akka and try to describe this beautiful city.
Yeah, Akka is a top international heritage city, right? So it's got so much culture and so much civilizations and so much. It's such a rich place to be living in. Unfortunately, Akka also has there's all this rich history and culture, but Akka is one of the targeted cities because Akka, especially the Arab identity of Akka. So just like any other mixed cities, as they like to call it, so Haifa as well, Yafa. So the Arab features of the city are slowly
disappearing.
Disappearing. They're not. It's not like a random thing, and it's not something that happens over time. It's a systematic approach. There's a systematic approach to kind of making Akka look less Arab,
feel more and more Israeli. The reality is in the old city, in the fortress. Is a city that's at least 5,000 years old.
Absolutely.
The settlers there are as evil as the settlers are in East Jerusalem. I mean, when they take over a flat or they buy a flat, the Israeli flags come out, and I mean, it really is yucky. But the hospitality in the market, the actual sort in Akka is wonderful, and the seafood. If you ever get there, the food, make sure you go to a Palestinian restaurant, but the seafood is something to savor.
Absolutely.
So Noura, I was going to ask that. So growing up, were you taught about the Nakba, or was this something that you weren't allowed to learn?
No, you're not allowed. Growing up as a student or as a teacher, I mean, also in Akka or within Israel, you're not allowed to discuss Nakba in history. I mean, actually, you're taught about the Nakba, which is the catastrophe and the ethnic cleansing and the deportation of 70% of the population and so on and so forth. You're taught about it from the Israeli point of view. So you're taught the Israeli
You're celebrating
narrative.
the independence.
So you're celebrating, exactly, the independence. It's very similar to another country which I happen to live in that celebrates an invasion day and calls it, the day of celebration.
The reality is that not only are you not taught about the Nakba, but there is an anti-Nakba law. Yes. It's against the law to commemorate the Nakba. Yes. It's against the law to speak about or educate about it, and so
funding gets pulled, and it's
and teachers have lost their jobs, and they lost the ability, like they were just unemployable after mentioning the Nakba, and so there's real, as I said earlier, it's a war. Like it's an awareness war where it's erasing the history, but also it's kind of occupying the minds basically, and the awareness of people.
And they're doing a pretty good job of it.
So there's another law, Noura, and I don't know how comfortable you are speaking about it, but there's the family reunification law.
Yeah.
And basically, primarily it was used to stop 48 pals marrying and meeting and reunifying with 67 pals. Or EJ pals or Gaza pals, and bringing them into, the motherland or Jewish Israel. Does that affect you at all?
Of course, it affects. It affects me on the personal level, but also it affects, any Palestinian living there. This is not the only law, basically, that discriminates against, that is clearly discriminating against Palestinians in Israel. There's the law of land, where you're not allowed to own, lands by law. There's the law of citizenship, the return, the family reunification, as you mentioned. But on a personal level, I happen to be living here because, basically my husband, I'm under this, the family reunification law, I cannot basically bring my husband to live back home in Palestine.
Well, my brother is married to a Palestinian from Akka, and he's been waiting for any result of his application for more than 4 years now, and which means that he will be separated from his kids who have not seen him for 4 years now because his wife is not in a position to visit Jordan. That's where they only can meet, and he doesn't live in Jordan, which is another example, like you said, in line.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of cases in Akka as well of people, like of couples that one of them is from the West Bank, and they're just like the wife has no legal status in there, so she can't go. They refuse to recognize her existence or basically her status, even though she's married to a citizen. But because he's Palestinian, so he just does not get that.
We should also remind our listeners that in fact you can be Jewish from anywhere in the world, with some tenuous link way back when to biblical Israel, and say that I'm a Jew and I'm performing Aliyah, and be granted instant citizenship for yourself, your family, and your offspring, and marry anyone and enjoy the full rights.
This is happening to us.
Yeah, you don't have to be personally Jewish. I mean, you can just claim Jewish ancestry. You can say, my mother or my great-grandmother is Jewish, so and you'll be granted citizenship, and you'll be granted the right of return, and you'll be able to own land, and you'll be able to get your family to live with you. But however, that only applies if you are Jewish. That doesn't work if you're Palestinian, and native Palestinian, right?
Noura, for the first 18 years, the Palestinians of Israel lived under military laws. Could you please tell us or share some of the story you may have heard from your parents or the older generation?
Yeah. So basically, it's the same case of, let's say, Palestinians in the West Bank at the moment. So you were not allowed. You needed a permit to leave your city or town to go to another city for a hospital or to go to another city for school or for So it was exactly like just another model of what's happening at the moment in the West Bank. So people could not. Of course, I mean, they were living there as colonized people, so there was no freedom of movement, no freedom of expression, of course, but also lots of lands were lost at the moment. So the loss of land did not stop at 1948. It's an ongoing and continuous process where they just the Israeli government ever since 1948 just kept annexing and just taking more lands from the Palestinians in Israel.
So Noura, I was going to ask, because obviously Israel have this huge propaganda machine to say that, we're a democratic country. We even have Arabs working with us and, are allowed to have a job and go in the Knesset and so forth. If you had 15 minutes or 3 minutes with Malcolm Turnbull, what would you say to him about, the realities of on the ground as a Palestinian?
I mean, I would say a democracy would not create two different set of laws and then apply them differently on different groups of people, especially their citizens, right? So a law should be a law, and we all should be abiding, or it needs to apply on all citizens equally. Now, if there's an inherent problem in the system, if the system privileges one group over the other,
which it clearly does.
Yeah, which clearly does, and all these laws are created to basically perpetuate the Jewish majority, but also the Jewish privilege. Like it is a privilege, right? For them it is a democracy. Maybe some of them might argue that even for some Jewish groups, they feel that it's not a democracy anymore because they're being also oppressed by the mainstream, or I don't know, something like that. But for us, it's like you can't argue. It's hard to pretend to be a democracy when the entire existence is built on ethnic cleansing. It is built on massacres. It's built on demolishing almost 700 villages. It's built on mass shooting. It's hard to pretend that you're a democracy like that. But what makes it harder is to continue these kind of practices. There are villages and towns in Israel that are not recognized. because
like
the people who live in yeah, exactly, like the Naqab, right? So there are lots of villages in the Naqab, but not only in the Naqab, by the way. There's villages in the Jalil, in the Upper Galilee, of people who are just not recognized. They're not registered, and the government refuses to give them any recognition. So there's no electricity, there's no water, there's no schools, so all these things. It's really hard to pretend that you are a democracy when you're obviously systematically working towards just suppressing, but also not. I would say it's more than marginalizing. I would say it's targeting the native of this land, right?
In line of what you said, Noura, some Israeli analysts say that the Palestinians of Israel are not just the second-class citizens. They could be 4th or 5th-class citizens after the European Jews, the Eastern Jews, the Russian Jews, the Falasha Jews, and then comes the Arab.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I
so
agree.
There are other levels of
the division. And it also basically connects. So, again, I think that system, a system that is inherently racist, just creates further racist groups and further racist practices and further racist people, right? Because if you live in that system, then you're bound to be influenced by this kind of thinking. And as that journalist said, the Palestinians don't even enjoy being a second-class citizen, right? And we're talking about natives, again, indigenous people, because the way that the Israeli government does is that it ties basically basic rights to serving in the army. Sometimes, so for you to get to be able to have or own or lease a piece of land, you need to be a soldier.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that's the only thing that kind of unites the Israeli society as a whole. Like it's that experience of trusting another people, that experience of going to the army and serving in the army. And that's what brings them all together, because they're also fractured, just like any other community or society, right? There's lots of fractions and lots of different people and different groups of people and different ways of thinking. So, and the way that they try to create this unity is by just pushing everyone or making it mandatory for everyone to go and serve in the army and oppress, having that common enemy where we all gang up against that common enemy. So
now, Noura, you mentioned the army, and this is a tough question, but I think let's be realistic and probably pose it. Could be challenging to answer. We know that also some of the Arabs from Druze and Bedouin background do serve in the army. How is this issue within the Arab spectrum? Is this an issue that we can debate on? Are they looked? I don't know. Tell me more about unpack this point, if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, I think, of course, this is an issue for Palestinians, but we need to keep in mind that Palestinians in 48, they're 20% of the population, but they make 50% of people living under poverty law. So they live under terrible conditions, not only socially but economically, of course, politically. The education is an issue. So it's something that we need to keep in mind when we talk about Palestinians in Israel, because there's this, the Israeli narrative tries to create a picture of Palestinians in Israel as, oh, look, they're living and they're happy and they're citizens, so hence we're a democracy. So this is not the case, right? So when you have 20% of the population that makes 60% of the people under poverty law, that's an issue. And the way that Israel, as I said, as I mentioned earlier, it ties basic rights to serving in the army. So, and it's not something that is alien to people living under occupation or colonization. That groups sometimes tend to want to kind of create that bridge between them and the colonizer, or let's call it the people in power, so that they can create better conditions for themselves. Now, of course, this thing is also encouraged by the Israeli government. They're always targeted, right? They would like to. The Israeli government, they're constantly trying to target the Palestinian minority. They try to push them into doing, if not an army service, there's something else that they call civil service or civic service or national service. So they they just want the Palestinians to basically detach themselves from the Palestinianity, right? So this is the question that was raised earlier, being called an Arab and not a Palestinian. This is kind of trying to get to create a mentality of you're not a Palestinian, so you're a citizen here. We give you citizenship. You need to be grateful. You need to be thankful that you are a citizen in Israel, and you should pay your dues, and basically you should serve in the army. So, unfortunately, that kind of rhetoric works with, people, with groups. And as I said earlier, it's a byproduct of being colonized. But even those groups that you mentioned earlier that do serve in the army, they end up not getting the same rights and privileges as the Israeli soldier, right? So if a Druzi soldier or a Badawi soldier, they go and they serve, the minute they hand back their uniform, they're called, you're stinky Arab. And it's the experience of many soldiers, right? There's a lot of soldiers that are talking about this and raising awareness. There's a lot of soldiers actually who, there's been stories of soldiers, like a story of a soldier an ex-soldier that I know who used to be a guard and basically in charge of one of the incarceration facilities. Yeah. So after a long process of learning and listening and talking to these prisoners, he quit. He quit basically his service, and then he became a lawyer, and he came back and he defended the Palestinian prisoners. So I agree. I think this is a major issue, right? It's something that the Palestinian society within Israel suffers from. But again, as I said, it's something that is now increasingly becoming that people are becoming more aware of, and they're more careful, as in because again, based on the experience of others, they served, they still didn't get anything. Lots of Badu from the Naqab serve. We still have unrecognized villages. They don't have electricity. They don't have infrastructure. So the
injustice is too big to be ignored.
Look, just on that, exactly. I was told a story while I was there that there was an Israeli Arab serving, and he was overseeing the house demolitions. And his house was in the wrong area. His actual house got demolished. So being
his own house.
His own house. So him being in the IDF wasn't enough protection. It came down to him being a Palestinian, and his house was demolished.
Yeah.
Now, Noura, we're heading towards the end of the interview, of this enlightening interview. In about maybe half a minute, is there something you want to share with our listeners, a message, a statement?
I would like to share. I think it's important, again, always going back to the context. Palestine is Akka, Palestine is Haifa, Palestine is Safad. When we talk about Palestine and occupation, very often people tend to forget Palestinians of 48, and they're treated as an Israeli internal affair, right? We need to keep in mind that these people are internally displaced people. So they live as refugees within their countries. There are areas which they're not allowed to live in. There are schools that they're not allowed to study in. So some let's say villages or kibbutzes, or I don't know what you want to call it. They have a committee, and that committee decides who lives in with them and who doesn't. And they have one of the factors which they call like cultural factor. And again, these are things that are done basically to keep them as internally displaced people and to prevent them from going back to the villages. Because some of the people living in Akka, they're not originally from Akka. Like my father's family, for example, were from Safad, and Safad is still there. However, we cannot go back to Safad. So this is an ongoing issue, and this is an issue that again links back to the Palestinians everywhere, right? This is the refugees. This is lands. And this is, basic rights. So it's another reflection of the bigger picture of what does it mean to be a Palestinian.
Fantastic. Thanks, Noura. So Noura is a Palestinian educator, writer, activist, and community organizer. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure talking to you.
With this, we've come to the end of this week's episode of Palestine Remembered. Thank you for tuning in. And remember to tune in next Saturday, same time, 9:30 in the morning. Until then, this is Nasser, Robert and Yusuf wishing you the best of time and salam.